Well, welcome everybody. Everybody's probably smiling or chuckling, and I can't see your faces because Murphy's Law was prevailing there for a while. And we have had a couple of technical difficulties, as sometimes is the case in this virtual realm that we're all living in today. Welcome to this public engagement session. We're looking for a very constructive interaction with everybody. My name is Gene Bollinger. I work with Weston and Sampson. And we're going to work through a brief presentation tonight, and then we are going to entertain questions and comments, and hopefully we all come away from this interaction a fair bit better informed than we were at the outset. We're anxious to get feedback from the folks that are participating in this meeting, and we're anxious to share some information and some thoughts about the design progress that's been made in regard to implementing some meaningful improvements out at White Pond. So with that, I think I'll start into the presentation. Attending tonight from the town of Concord, Kate Hodges, who's the deputy town manager, is with us tonight. She's chiming in from her phone, and I can see her crystal clear at this moment in time. And we can hear her well as too. She's going to participate. And then well, I think in a perfect world, you were going to sort of moderate the questions, but we'll go to plan B on that.
We're going to try, yeah.
And rest assured, we'll get to all of the questions. Ryan Kane and Ryan Orr are here from the Concord Recreation Department. And then from Weston and Sampson, my colleagues Brandon Kunkel and Tim Sheehan are all here to participate in this interaction. This is the meeting agenda, and I wanted to note right at the outset that the meeting is being recorded. Can I confirm that from my colleagues?
Yes,
that is happening. Very good, Ryan Kane. Thank you so much. The meeting length is intended to be about 90 minutes. That's plus or minus. We figure that that's about equal to people's attention spans to interactions through Zoom and other mechanisms that are like this. We've already covered the introductions. There'll be a slide on the Zoom meeting protocols. We're going to go through a presentation. Kate will talk a little bit about the terms of the gift and the general project intent from a town perspective. Ryan Kane will talk a little bit about what's been observed and learned by, I think, by all accounts, successful 2019 and 2020 seasons out at White Pond. And we're going to talk a little bit about project goals, the work completed to date, the actual scope of physical site improvements that we're contemplating and anxious to get feedback on. Talk a little bit about budget and cost estimate, project timeline. And then, as I mentioned, we'll get into the Q&A period. The Zoom protocols. So we want everybody to be able to be heard. It sounds like and seems like we've got a number of folks that are on board, and that's great. That's awesome. I suspect a couple more will probably join us along the way. But raise your hand or post a question using the Q&A protocol. And we'll take them in order, but we'll alternate back and forth. So whatever you're most comfortable with. If you'd like to just type the question, do it through Q&A. If you'd like to raise your hand, we'll recognize you and we'll ask you to ask your question or present your comment orally. So that's how we're going to work through this meeting. And right now, I'd just like to turn it over to Kate. Kate, this is a slide that relates to the terms of the gift and the town's basic project intent. Kate?
Great, thank you, Gene. So I'm having some technical difficulties here, so bear with me, but wanted to say good evening to everyone, and thank you for coming. My name is Kate Hodges, and I am the town manager in Concord. And thanks for coming to the virtual meeting this evening. And we wanted to start before the presentation. I'd like to address a couple of misconceptions or criticisms or misinformation that have been going about, just to try to create a framework. I'm hopeful that after that, we can get started, as Jean said, with what we hope to be a really productive and collaborative experience. So first, I want to assure everyone here and anyone that may watch this rebroadcast of the meeting on our PEG station or online that we're here to engage in a discussion about what you, as the citizens of Concord and users of the beach area, want to see at White Pond. The images that you are going to see on the slides tonight serve as both a springboard for conversation and ideas for some of the amenities which you may or may not like to see. The team has no preconceived designs. There are no ideas in mind or in the minds of my staff for a must-have. And of course, as Parks and Rec professionals for the past several decades now, we have professional opinions and information and options which we want to share with you all, but and we want to share those with others in town who might not be in attendance at this meeting, but ultimately we are permitted to providing you a design concept that is accessible and sustainable and in line with the majority of what the community wants to see. Essentially, we are committed. It's your park, it's not ours. There are no foregone conclusions. There's nothing in this design here this evening that is set in stone other than what is regulated by both state and local code. That said, I've heard a lot of concern over the past, over the ideas that the area is being called a park. And I'd like to address that first by stating that the community, as far as naming, can call or decide whatever it wants to call any of our public spaces for itself. Naming rights and the process for those naming rights are determined by the select board and the town manager. And if the majority of the community wishes to call this particular site or the beach something specific, a proposal can certainly be made to the select board relative to that. And my staff and I are ready and willing to help with those efforts should anybody have them. But relative to the actual park distinction, I'd like to offer, and I'm going to read from the donation agreement and the deed, which was ultimately signed and recorded in December of 2019, which specifically says, quote, "The premises are conveyed to the grantee, which is the town, under the provisions of Article 99 of the Massachusetts Constitution, to be managed and controlled by the grantee in perpetuity as parkland for the promotion of recreational uses such as swimming, beach activities, boating, fishing, walking, hiking, picnicking, and the list goes on." So the deed specifies and requires that we treat the property as a park, and so therefore adhering to all the regulations in the law relative to parkland. Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 45, governs parks and playgrounds and public recreational domains. And while mostly focused on access and availability of certain amenities, there is also a subsection that deals with active protection efforts to maintain resource areas. So in simple terms, we have a statutory authority and a requirement to improve and allow equal and unfettered access to the areas. And equally important, we have a duty to improve upon, or in this case, create from scratch a proper stormwater management system, which works to protect both the pond's waters, health, and the wood side and green space areas. So the improvements that you're going to hear about tonight and many of the proposals that we're going to discuss really deal with that type of compliance. Also related to access, I would offer that the U.S. Architectural Access Board, also referred to as the AAB, has specific requirements for outdoor recreational and park access routes. And specifically, the AAB says that the routes are defined as, and I'm going to read this, quote, "a continuous, unobstructed path intended for pedestrian use and must connect all elements of the property, including, but not limited to, restrooms, water fountains, trash receptacles, waterfront and beach areas, float and canoe launches, picnic and shade areas, and any other public areas which may work as access that is either programmed or meaning developed or unprogrammed." So there, what we're trying to do is be able to create access points that like I said, are accessible to everybody, to any area that is either programmed or unprogrammed on the property. And lastly, there seems to be a misunderstanding surrounding the overlook or the picnic grove, which was shown in the first iteration of the discussion image. And that area, for the record, does not need to be a picnic grove. It can be anything that we want. However, a commitment was made by the town to White Pond Associates at the time of the gift. White Pond Associates was specifically looking to memorialize a longtime president and board member, Mr. Dick Hill, for his efforts related to the pond for many, many years. And White Pond's Associates executive team discussed the ideas of an overlook or a pavilion or some type of separate area that was separate from the beach, which would be dedicated as a memorial to him. And former town manager Chris Whalen agreed to this as a term of the gift, and also agreed to include another memorial type structure within that same area that would highlight and thank all the long-standing members of the White Pond Association for their generous gift, and also for their stewardship of the property for many, many years. So one idea we had, which you'll see on the discussion images, was a picnic area. The initial image showed grills, but we're not interested in doing that. And those have since been removed. But we're certainly open to any other ideas, like a reflection garden, an overlook with benches, whatever folks might believe might be an asset to the property. We also heard concerns of its closeness to the abutters, and hope that you will see that the latest iteration that Gene and his team are going to show tonight have kind of taken that into account, and we've tried to mitigate that. That said, it can be moved, it can be relocated. However, it's important to note that the presence was and is an obligation that was made by the town for the terms of the gifts. So I'm hoping that this initial information can help everybody on the call who has concerns and questions about these particular things. I would ask that everyone listen with an open mind, and once the presentation is complete, we'll happily take questions. I also want to note that I'll be taking notes related to the question and answers, despite my technological struggles here. And I will give those to Public Information Officer Erin Stevens, who will post those questions and answers, plus tonight's presentation, on the town's website under the White Pond page. And that page, for your knowledge, also has other important documents, such as the White Pond Advisory Committee's recent recommendations and reports to the Select Board, property deeds, and other related gift information. So enough of me, and without further delay, I'm turning the presentation over to Gene Bollinger from Weston and Sampson, his team, and Ryan Kane from Concord Recreation. Thank you.
Kate, thank you very much. Okay, so this next slide, Ryan Kane, this is your cue. Please chime in and give us a little bit of information about what you folks from Concord Recreation have observed about the operation of the beach and the swimming amenities out at White Pond for calendar year 2019, 2020, and maybe some of the lessons learned that we're folding into our thinking about continued operation and the physical site improvements to be undertaken at the site. Ryan?
Great, thank you, Gene. Ryan Kane, the Director of Recreation. We started off before we operated. We did hold a couple of public meetings, initial meetings with the public, and also the White Pond members from the previous years to kind of hear out and talk out some of their issues, their concerns. It was clear to us that many people liked the way that the beach was operated by the White Pond Associate staff. We intentionally went out and recruited and retained many of that staff from the previous year to kind of come in and be able to guide us a little bit and to how that operation went. And for me as a recreation director, it also made me feel a lot safer knowing that we had somebody that knew the facility and was well aware of that. And we've been fortunate to have Ann Boudreau there as our beach manager for the past 2 years. And I think that's been a great asset and a great transition to us from the White Pond Associates to the town along the way. Also heard of some issues for operational and on-site, and we addressed the best way we could. We did purchase new restrooms, and the restroom facility that we purchased is one that is pumped out, so it doesn't have anything that can seep into the the ground and potentially go into the water there at the facility. And we also fund a porta potty to be on site for the fishermen year round, because we had heard from the local residents that that was an issue down on the site. We do keep it there year round. Unfortunately, we have to move it to the upper parking lot in the winter time. One of the other things we heard is that many people were afraid as soon as it became a town beach that everybody was going to come rushing over from Walden Pond and it was going to become Revere Beach. We hired staff. We had rangers on the site for the first year. And we're very cognitive of that. We didn't see that play out in that means, but we were very cognitive of being aware of the impact on the site. I don't know why I'm echoing. Just for some statistics here, White Pond Associates in 2018 had approximately 450 family memberships. In 2019, the town of Concord sold 646 family memberships, and in 2020, we only sold 503 family memberships, mainly based on the scenarios of this past summer and managing COVID-19 through that. Operationally, we didn't see a drastic difference in the crowd levels at the beach. They were very similar to the White Pond Associate years, the crowd levels at the beach, in both of our years that we operated. So just in speaking from Ann, who knew the history and had been with the White Pond Associates for about 10 years prior to, she was saying that the crowd levels that we had when we were operating as the town weren't very different to what they were for the White Pond Associates. This past summer, we did a survey after the year. Obviously, operating in 2020 was very different for us. 9.3 out of 10 was our safety ranking from all the participants in the survey. Most families say they visit 5 to 10 times in the summer. 89% of people said they would return this summer with the same operational system. Our big flaw this summer was just the reservation and booking system. That was our biggest problem, and we'll be looking to readdress that. And then just some observations on the facility, again, was that the crowd levels, I know this year was a tough year because of how everything played out, but in our first year, 2019, crowd levels of the beach were not different at all compared to the White Pond Associate years. And from my own perception, but more importantly from Ann Boudreau's perception, who had great experience there managing the beach previously. And the other thing is we've noticed the dramatic impact of the washout on the hill and at the facility. And when we're there on site and you have that downpour rain for a couple hours and you come in and you see the impact of it, you know, and trying to accommodate that. And then just the last thing of point is I felt we've had a strong point in this. I'm sure the White Pond Associates for years tried their best to manage and maintain the site, but the town has a facilities division on hand that can respond to and answer to things. So whether it's tree limbs, the washouts and trying to rake out and do types of things, we're able to utilize the staff to be able to come in and address things on a quicker level. And so I thought that was a good plus for the transition, is just having the town resources available there for the beach. So I think that pretty much wraps it up from me, Gene, for how we've seen 2019 and 20 play out for us in the operational of the beach.
Okay, Ryan, thanks very much. So just by way of a little bit more about our team, I'm serving as the principal in charge for the project. Have had the pleasure of working in Concord on multiple projects in recent years within the parks and recreation and open space arena. Brandon Kunkel is serving as the project manager. He's really leading our design and permitting effort. Tim Sheen has also been actively involved in the design development of the amenities out at this facility. Tim actually leads our aquatics group. So under the guise of Tim's direction, we're involved in planning, designing, constructing, and in fact, in some cases, operating public swimming amenities, whether it be an indoor pool, an outdoor pool, a swimming hole, such as White Pond. Brandon and I are going to make the presentation. Tim's available for questions when we get to the Q&A period, as will be the other folks from the Concord side of the equation. So with that, I'm going to start into it. We're probably going to take about 15 or 20 minutes maximum to work through a series of slides, which I think will give you a sense of what we're thinking about in regard to physical improvements that help support the programming that the town aspires to offer to residents of the town of Concord. So basic project goals, and I think first and foremost, and this really picks up where Kate sort of left off, you know, there's an essence to this place. There's an essential character that's unique to this place. And it's a country swimming hole, if you will. And we've got steep terrain, we've got lots of mature vegetation, we've got some parking, we've got the beachfront, we've got some amenities that help support public use and enjoyment. And it's really about making it safer, code compliant, more convenient, more comfortable, more attractive for the people that will enjoy this property and this amenity for decades to come, literally. So I think that's something that was really foremost at our mind as we went through a design development process. And reiterating again what Kate noted at the beginning, we're at a point in the design process. We've made some advancements, but we're very much interested in getting people's feedback, and that feedback can have an effect on the direction of the improvements that we ultimately end up recommending to the town and ultimately recommend or end up permitting through the notice of intent process. One of the big gains that we believe to the core of our being about this project is the opportunity to really improve how stormwater is managed at White Pond and on this property. And it's not managed in the most proactive and most productive way from an environmental protection standpoint historically. So we're looking to capture water, we're looking to recharge water, we're looking to treat it, we're looking to release it in a more methodical manner that has less impact on water quality, on the slopes and the terrain and the vegetation that surrounds the pond. And this is something that's going to be vetted in tremendous amount of detail as we go through the notice of intent process with the Concord Conservation Commission. But we've already identified essential aspects of the stormwater management system that do not exist now and that will offer a degree of protection and environmental enhancement as improvements are implemented at the property. We're looking to improve aesthetics and functionality of the beach as a community recreation asset. That's really core mission here, isn't it? So beach area accommodations, trails and connections, gathering areas and shelters, improved parking areas, but all at a scale and in a design motif that's in keeping with sort of a country swimming hole, if you will, that really, even on the busiest day, can only sustain and support a certain level of usage, which the town has the ability to control very carefully. Core to the mission too, I would say, is providing ADA accessibility. In this day and age, when you're offering public park and open space amenities to citizens, there is a really strong intent to make things as inclusive as possible, as multi-generational as possible, as accessible as possible. So we have an inherent obligation to comply with federal and state regulations, local regulations, and to make this property as user-friendly as possible for all of the members of our community. And that too, in association with environmental protection, I think is core to the mission out here. We have a DCR boat ramp that's been long established and much loved by the community, and clearly we're protecting that. And we're trying to be cognizant of the tree canopy. So we're going to be careful in regard to removals when a removal is required because of disease or a tree that's near its maximum maturity or that is a safety hazard. We'll be looking to replace at some multiple of the tree that actually ends up getting removed. So those are the basic goals that we've been working with since the outset of the project. We completed site survey, we've done some wetlands flagging, we've gotten significantly into the development of drawings that begin to convey the essence of the improvements that the town would like to undertake, and we've been secured to help advance on the town's behalf. We have advanced stormwater management designs, and we have pulled together a notice of intent. However, there's still work to be done on that, and we're not formally appearing before them as yet until we make a submission. And during that process, there'll be plenty of opportunity for public review, comment, input, so on and so forth. And I think it'll be very well advertised when the project ends up going through the notice of intent process. So there you have it, the permitting being part of the work that's remaining, final designs, bid documents, secure the remaining funding come Springtown meeting, whenever that is to be held. And it probably will not be held as early in the calendar year as would be typical because of the impacts of COVID-19. It may be in June-ish of next year. Bidding of the project, contractor selection, and then the actual construction of the project. So those are the basic tasks that are remaining. And I think embedded in many of these aspects of the work remaining is continued public input. We want people to stay connected, continue to contribute their thoughts and good ideas in regard to the advancement of the final designs for improvement at White Pond. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Brandon Kunkel. Brandon's going to work through some existing conditions photos relatively quickly, just so all of this is fresh in your mind. And then he's going to highlight the basic aspects of the design development drawings as they stand at this moment in time. Brandon?
Great, thank you, Gene. And as Gene noted, I'm with Weston & Sampson. I am a project manager, landscape architect, part of the design program. And so with that, these next few slides are just kind of some of the observations that were done through several site visits. Some of the and this really relates to more safety, perhaps, but also particularly the stormwater management, as Gene noted. But several folks might take note that right now the existing entrance, which is technically a two-way, is only 20 feet wide. 24 feet is an ideal situation for a two-way path of travel. We're looking to where we can and where it makes sense, widen the road up to 4 feet maximum, and really try and save as many of the trees as possible along that edge. And we feel pretty comfortable that we can do that by shifting the roadway to one side or the other, or a combination of in either direction, to work with the existing trees and try and protect as many of them as we can. Next slide, Gene. And then as you pull in to the main drive and into the upper parking area, as we refer to it, this is the large parking area at the top of this hill. Those drives are both one way in, one way out, but they're still very narrow. We're looking to where we can, once again, widen the entrance drives one way to about 15 feet. Right now, they range from just about 10 feet, maybe up to 12 feet max, but 15 feet is preferred for one-way direction, ideally. And that's for mostly emergency vehicles if they're needed, operation type vehicles to get in and get out and make those wide turns without impacting the trees at the edges. Where it makes sense and protecting the trees, there's a few areas where we might be able to sneak in a few extra parking spots at the top where they could be used to possibly get out of the car and have a picnic. And we'll get into the possibility of a picnic area. When we say picnic area, it's really no more than just a picnic table and perhaps a trash can, as Kate noted earlier. No barbecues, but just a place to go have a brown bag lunch, carry in and carry out. Next slide, Gene. The main parking lot up at the top is going to stay relatively unchanged. It's actually in fairly decent shape. At the major impact, the actual square footage of the parking lot will not change. The amount of parking in the parking lot will not change. We might look to restripe, particularly in the corner up by the outhouse, as you see in this photo, would be to possibly realign the accessible parking stalls with the potential of a new ADA walkway that would bring them down the slope, down to the beach area, and we'll show that in the proposed plan. And then also possibly having a few bike racks that would actually allow people to bike here instead of using a car. And then if we could go back to that slide real quick, Gene, if you don't mind. Or ultimately, so right now the parking, and this is part of the big goals of this project, as Gene had mentioned, the stormwater management. Right now, the runoff from the parking lot is really just sheet flow. There's a natural depression in the middle area, and it has actually really good soils. We're actually looking to use that as possible stormwater collection and infiltration, and prevent the parking lot from actually running down the hillside and then onto the main drive, and then ultimately down into the pond. So these are the existing stairs as they are now. You can see in the photographs, there's quite a bit of erosion along the edges. We would possibly consider removing those throughout, providing some breathing room for those trees on both edges, and replace the stairs with either new stairs that are more natural feeling with the paving type material, that which we'll talk about. Ideally, it would be some slope improvements to mitigate the runoff and erosion that occurs now, and protect the trees, and then also possibly reforest the area where we would remove the steps. Improve the arrival and the beachfront access. Right now, it's not ideal for being able to provide ADA access, drop off, turnaround. There's no real designated ADA parking down there, as well as emergency service vehicle access. So we would look to do that, as well as provide ADA access from the drive down to the beach area directly. This is down at the bottom of the hill. You can see this area right now, the two spots that you see that are ADA within the top photograph, those are not compliant given the slopes or the cross slopes of that area. And we would look to adjust the grades to be able to provide accessible parking that is code compliant, as well as use the topography to our advantage to capture the water and just not have it run down the hill, down the boat ramp and into the pond directly. And then, so that's the intent of the bottom of the hill. We're looking to capture, collect, and infiltrate the water from the uphill in this general area down at the bottom that is already paved. Adjust the grades to mitigate the runoff, and then infiltrate the water through a subsurface storage collection system.
I might just add, Brandon, even though a couple of catch basins are appearing in this photograph, they're moderately useful at best. And at a big storm event, they don't capture nearly the amount of rainfall that we're looking for. And in fact, many areas of pavement that are reflected in this photograph bypass these structures completely.
Correct.
So they don't end up going into the structure, even in a more moderate rainstorm.
And then, oh, go ahead. So we talked about improved beachfront arrival already. There we go. And then it's really providing a accessible connection to the boat ramp and then the beachfront access as well. And that includes the seasonal restroom trailer that Ryan was talking about earlier. That is a self-contained system. We want to integrate the bathroom facility into a formalized area where it is accessible and then easily maintained on a seasonal basis, cleaned out and operated by the town versus having it sit up on blocks as you see here. So it would definitely be 100% accessible. The new lifeguard house is being retained because it is new and good shape. And then a big part of this would be maintain and enhance the naturalized beachfront as it is today. There will be some invasive management along the edges, but really ultimately the beachfront area is going to be relatively untouched in this project proposal. And then as previously noted, we want to provide ADA access down to the water's edge. So what we would like to propose and get feedback on is this current plan that you see here on your screen. Overall, as I noted, the upper parking lot is remaining unchanged as it is today. And then as you can see, moving from the right side of the parking lot towards the left and the main access drive, there is some opportunity to provide a few additional spaces without impacting tree removal in that general area. And then there's a natural depression in the middle. We would like to use that, as I indicated earlier, to actually capture the runoff from the large parking lot before it has an opportunity to run down the two entry drives in and out, and then ultimately it runs down the large main access drive down to the beach area. So we think by really doing a series of collection systems and strategies versus capturing it all down at the bottom, which would only increase the area required to capture that amount of water, we're able to do smaller, more delicate or informal stormwater collection system that is more naturalized and less structured. And then the picnic grove, which Kate had mentioned earlier, it's really just proposed to be a series of picnic tables, nothing more than that, trash receptacles, with some accessible parking to get them directly to the picnic area. The material in that area could possibly be a stabilized stone dust path or something. We're definitely thinking a pervious or material, natural feeling, woodland feeling, organic material that is accessible. Just for perhaps some more convenience or alternative route down to the beachfront area, there's a proposal of a woodland path. Really, that is just a naturalized path that would weave throughout the existing trees, no tree removal required to put that pathway in. That's not, doesn't necessarily have to be accessible. We have other accessible routes that are more direct that are possible or possibly being proposed tonight and open for discussion. If we go back quickly up to the upper parking lot area again, you'll see what we're calling an upper pavilion. That's really just a shade structure that would provide some shade for picnicking with or family gatherings versus a single picnic table. If that is an option, We would like, to the best of our ability, work with the trees that are already in place. That's why a lot of the shapes that you're seeing are very organic. They're being tailored to work with the trees that are in place. All this material would be, once again, an organic material, a crushed stone, a stabilized stone dust type material that allows for water infiltration and good root growth. The concrete pad, the pad underneath the pavilion is proposed to be concrete only for accessible reasons and maintenance and stability of the pavilion itself. And then, as I noted, there might be some realignment of the existing ADA parking spaces. Those are really to align with the proposed ADA pathway. And there's two pathways that you see here. And one is ADA accessible route. That's the one that runs kind of at a angular motion to the left. And then there's a circuitous organic hillside trail and steps. And that's really to replace the one that is there now. We understand that the accessible route is possibly not the most direct route given the topography and the length that we need to cover, as well as the trees that we're trying to protect and save. So we wanted to provide an alternative option of a more direct route for those that are able to take it, with stairs, and really it would, instead of a continuous staircase as there now, it'd be a series of steps along the entire path. And then pulling it away from existing trees to provide further growth for the existing trees and protect their roots.
So I think, Brandon, the overall plan shows the full extent of the pathways, both ADA compliant and more direct, not ADA compliant, that
Correct.
lead from the upper parking lot all the way down to the beachfront.
Correct.
So the intention was to talk about things that were a little bit global at this level, and then bore down into some of the additional details. I think you did a good job covering much of the stuff at the upper parking area.
Sure. Yeah, and this is good to go back. Thank you, Gene. So down at the beachfront area, you know, as Gene mentioned, the boat launch or the kayak launch would be relatively unchanged. We would adjust the grades up at the top of the boat launch, as I mentioned previously, to work with the stormwater collection area. We would remove the two existing bath or restroom houses that are there now. They are not operational. We would remove those, and in that same area outside the no build limit, which is actually the two buildings that are there now fall within the no build limit. So we would pull the possibility of a overlook or a pavilion, a lower pavilion overlook in that area outside the no build limit, further away from the water. It also helps with accessibility from the lower parking or the drop off area, as we're calling it, in the restrooms, accessible route from the restroom building down to that pavilion.
Brandon, do you want me to go to the enlargement for the beachfront area?
Yeah, that's fine, Gene. And we can toggle back and forth if questions are had. So you'll see here the seasonal restrooms, which are the existing trailer that we saw in the earlier photos. We would essentially look to construct a deck at the door level and provide ADA access up to those restrooms, and then tie that into a lower pavilion and overlook area with an accessible route and decking system. The decking system allows us to have minimal invasive construction of the tree root system. There would be some ADA, designated ADA that is compliant parking, as well as emergency and service vehicle parking down below. And then the the already existing kayak or boat launch parking that is there today would remain. You can see the silhouetted or the outline of a subsurface chamber system that would collect all the runoff from basically the upper hill slope of the main entry drive. And the way we're capturing that is through a series of trench drains along the main access drive that would collect it, and then within the limits of the existing drive, so that we're not piping and putting pipes through root zone systems, keeping the main collection system within the drive. We would pipe that down to an infiltration chamber system below that parking area or the drop-off area. And there's actually 2 subsurface chamber systems potentially being proposed, and that's really to minimize the impact on tree removal. We weren't able to necessarily collect all the water in one chamber system. So we're looking to possibly do it within the beach area. And then it would either recharge down to the groundwater or during major storm events or back-to-back major storm events, it would go into the chamber system, settle out, and then overflow into the beach or the pond as it does today. The ADA access path traverses approximately 50 feet from the upper parking lot down to the beach elevation. This would all be a series of ramps or sloped walkways. We tried to minimize the amount of ramps possible, but in general, it is, I would say it's about 80% less than 5% slope, which allows for it to be more of a sloped walkway versus a ramp system. So railings are not required on anything that's 5% or less. We do have a few scenarios where railings are required, but in general, it's intended to work with the existing topography. We've curved it to the best of our ability to save as many trees as possible. We will have to remove some trees, but we will definitely be meeting the requirements of the town for tree replacement and the reforestation requirements as well.
So Brandon, we're getting fairly deep into this meeting, and I'd like to wrap it up fairly quickly. I think people are getting a sense for the essence of the improvements. The tree canopy in places is not that robust either, and we think that there's a great opportunity to supplement what's out there with additional tree planting, regardless of whether we're taking trees down or not. And I think there's a great opportunity to do some understory planting as well. That's typical of a New England sloped woodland that helps to stabilize the slopes, in addition to the stormwater management strategies that would be deployed out at White Pond. So let's move on to the precedent image board, just to wet people's whistle, and I'll wrap it up with a note about where we stand from a budget standpoint and schedule. I'd very much like to get to public input and comments at this point. So the project budget, let me just jump into this. We're at about just under $1.5 million for the total program. Much of the financial, much of the funding that's needed to be secured has been secured, but there's additional money that would be secured during the Springtown meeting process. This is a chart that Kate has put together that identifies the level of improvements that would be implemented at the property, adding up to a total of the 1.496, just under 1.5 million. The funding sources, where that funding is coming from, the fiscal year where that funding is coming from. Yeah, so that identifies basically the budget. And by the way, we can go back to any slide that we need to respond to any comment or question or query that somebody has. The tentative project timeline, here we are, approaching winter of 2020. And we'd like to work through the final design process towards the end of this year, the beginning of next year. The permitting potentially along that same timeline. With funding in hand, we'd like to actually bid a project, scope to be determined, but to do some preliminary site preparation work for the larger improvement program. And this potentially could be accomplished in the late spring of 2021 in advance of the swimming season at White Pond. And that would put us in a better position to implement the majority of the work come fall of 2021. So the funding would be secured, hopefully, to implement the total program that's envisioned as part of Springtown meeting. We'd look to bid the second part of the program when funding is secured. We'd go through the summer social season, if you will, the swimming season at White Pond, and then look to break ground on the more robust of the implementation programs the fall of next year, September of 21, finishing up in advance of the next operational swimming season in May or June of 2022. And this is the image sheet that identified some of the precedent elements that could be incorporated. And again, looking to make use of natural materials, materials that fit this woodland sloped pond setting that is this new property that's under the domain of the town of Concord. And Brandon, I'll give you one last shot if there's anything you wanted to add to that about anything particular here, and then we'll roll into the Q&A.
No, I think, you know, just sticking with the natural character and the beauty of the land that's there now, using natural materials versus heavy-handed, more, you know, urban commercial materials. So,
okay.
Great. Thanks, guys. So I finally got it to work, and I want to thank Chris Carmody because he really stuck with it. So God bless you, Chris Carmody. You've made it work. I am able to see the questions. There are 3 hands raised. There's 25 questions, and wow. I was able, which is awesome. It's so good that people are asking questions. So I'm hopeful to go through, you know, maybe a third of the 4 people raised their hand. How exciting. So I'm hopeful to go through a few questions, and then we'll go to the hand raised. So the persons that have 5 people who have their hand raised, what we would do is when we call on you, I'll bring you up, and I may have to rely on Chris for this, but you'll be on camera. So I'm asking, because we're recording this, to please state your name and your address, if you would, please, and then proceed with your question, and hopefully someone here can answer that. So let's, if we could, can we stop the screen share for a moment? And then if somebody needs us to go back for the screen share, we're happy to do that. So let me see. I'm going to go with the first question, which says, I'm going to paraphrase, would having a handicap parking area nearer to the beachfront eliminate the need for the disruptive ramp between the upper parking area and the beachfront? And so the answer to that is no. And the reason for that, simply stated, is that there are about 3 parking spots that we can get down below that would be on the town side of the property, not the state boat launch property. And those areas, 2 of them, or the equivalent of 2 of them, are really necessary for emergency access and emergency parking. And we heard that when we did the staff review of the property. So most of the time when the town either accepts a property, takes over a property, purchases a property, we have a staff review. And so the police and fire chiefs and their respective captains were both adamant that the emergency response areas were grossly underwhelmed down there, and it was a hard sell for them to be able to figure to bring down any type of ambulance service, or even, heaven forbid, a large apparatus for fire. And so they requested that they have 2 spots that are dedicated to be able to pull in and pull out. and particularly to be able to back in for ambulance services. And so the 3 spots that would be available for ADA accessibility are limited down to 1, and then a pull-off area that we would have for drop-offs. And so we're also programming up top, and so we need to have that. And in our configuration, we cannot consider the spots over by the boat launch because they're technically for a separate program requirement, in that they are for either temporary loading and uploading of canoes and kayaks or non-motorized boats, or for people who are fishing. So I hope that answers that. What is wetlands flagging is the question. Perhaps we can ask Jean or Brandon to answer that.
Yeah, sure. It's so, you know, we're adjacent to a water body, and adjacent to that water body are some wetland resource areas. And whenever you're working in close proximity to a water body and wetland resource areas, you have to go through a permitting process. And in this case, we're going through a notice of intent process with the Conservation Natural Resources Commission in Concord. And as part of the mapping that you do to develop the final design plans, you locate the limits of the resource areas. And the limits of the resource areas in this case might be the high water level for the pond, and the limits of those vegetated bordering areas that surround the pond. So that gets picked up and it gets shown on the physical plans that we develop. And the Conservation Commission has very tight control of everything that occurs within a natural resource area. We're not proposing anything. And then they have a 25-foot zone that they're calling a no-build zone. They'd like to see no impacts whatsoever within that zone. And they actually have jurisdiction to 100 feet outside of the water body. So anything that's being developed within that domain comes under their jurisdiction, and we have to do it in a way that's sensitive and protective of those natural resources. So there are physical elements that we pick up in the field and transfer onto the base mapping that's used for the construction drawings.
Okay, thank you, Jean. Let me see, there's a couple of comments here, and I'm not going to read the comments out loud necessarily, but we are certainly writing them down. Comments about the roadway in and out being thought to be conducive to slowing folks down, so it probably doesn't need renovation. Another person asking, what is the logic behind adding the picnic areas or some kind of mandate? So at the beginning of our conversation, I talked about the gift acceptance and the discussions that were made through the town and the White Pond Association for their, the White Pond Associates for their very generous gift. And that dealt with the commitment to specifically highlight, call out, and thank in some kind of more formalized way their generous gift and their stewardship over the years. So I would invite that person. We're going to be replaying this. It'll be available online to go back and perhaps review that initial part of the conversation. Let me see. Someone asked about the maturity of the trees and if we have to remove trees, what will be planted as replacement. So as both Brandon and Jean alluded to, we have a very robust reforestation plan. It is consistent with the Natural Resources Commission that requires a 3-to-1 replacement schedule. So for every 1 tree or shrubbery that has to come down, we'll replace it with 3. Will the maturity be the same? Certainly not. It'll be the same, certainly not be the same metric. We certainly can't get our hands on 100, 150-year-old oak trees. And yet, if you were to walk the hillside right now, you would see that most of those trees are dead, decaying, and certainly not well maintained. And so what we would do is try to get the most mature and healthy shrubbery that we can get, trees that we can get, and replace them in a way that they're both native to the area and helpful with both the aesthetics and the stormwater management, which is really what we're planning. This question says there are handicap areas at the bottom. I'm sorry, now I just lost that. Sorry, because when someone puts a question in, it spits it all back down the bottom. There's handicapped areas at the bottom, but I just heard Brandon just mention they were not. Please comment. I'm sorry, this person just says their name is Beth, and I'm wondering, Beth, if you could rephrase the question, because I'm not entirely sure what the question is. Oh, and here she is.
So yes, there are existing handicapped spots down at the bottom, but the cross slope or the slopes on those parking spaces exceed current accessible code requirements to be considered handicap accessible. So part of the improvements is to adjust the grades to primarily slow down the stormwater runoff, but also where we are proposing the handicap accessible spot down at the bottom to make that compliant.
So Beth, I pressed ask to unmute. I'm not sure if that's working. I'm hopeful that that answers your question. If it doesn't, if you could do us a favor and raise your hand, we will certainly come back to you. So this next one says Jean's last comment on the catch basin inadequacy. Does that mean the major catch basin work over the 2 years was ineffective? And so while Jean might not know, the major catch basin, I assume what you're referring to as the major catch basin work wasn't really work, but it was essentially the Concord Public Works Department that was commissioned to basically clean out those stormwater drains. And they didn't do anything to the infrastructure. They didn't largen it. They didn't make it any better, any clearer for any debris or stormwater management. Essentially what they did is they went in and they basically scooped out everything that was there to try to make it as effective as possible. And that lasted not a super long amount of time, because again, there's no capture of the stormwater as it comes down the hill. And so basically what you're getting is the runoff of everything that is coming off of the trees, off of the roadway, any kind of sand and debris, and it's coming down and it clogs. So depending on the size of your storm, it basically would clog, you know, within a matter of a couple of storms thereafter. So there wasn't any major changes or infrastructure improvements there. Since there will be more visitors than previously, won't we need more parking? So I think I'm gonna parlay that than in the past. So I'm gonna parlay that over to Ryan Kane, because he and his team have been managing the operational considerations. And my understanding from him is that the parking seems to be adequate, but I'd like him to be able to speak to that.
Sure. We have not seen many days where we fill that lot at all. And as I said earlier in the presentation, that the beach crowds have not differed. If anything, we think it's been less than what we had under the White Pond Associates. So we haven't seen the large crowds at the site that would dictate the call for drastic more parking. The plan does include a couple of additional parking spots when we can, as we come in through the driveway where there's spots that allow for that. So we would add to parking, but it wouldn't be a drastic overhaul to what's happening there for parking.
Thanks, Ryan. Let me see, I'm sorry. Have you considered the natural ebb and flow of the water line into the design? So I think perhaps just looking from the timestamp, this might have been written before Brandon went into the detail that we really weren't actually doing anything from the stone wall that's built there for the entire shoreline. And so the ebb and flow of the water line into the design really didn't come into consideration, mostly because we don't really want to do anything impactful within the 25-foot no build zone. let's see, the hillside is ADA path. Is it only necessary because of the picnic facilities? I think I answered that earlier. No, it is not. It is a requirement because we need to have access to all of the programmed areas, and regardless of whether we have any type of programming on the hillside or not, we need to be able to provide people parking for that. And we also are meeting our minimum requirements for ADA parking spots down below. And so we need to have a drop-off area and then permanent parking up above. Regarding the pavilion at the top parking lot, I can't imagine wanting to picnic in the parking lot instead of down at the pond. True, that is probably that might be some people's personal opinion. As a public park, this is going to be open 3 seasons. A lot of people may want to park up the top, particularly when it's not swimming season. Additionally, as I discussed at the initial part of the meeting, there was an overlook and another commitment made to the White Pond Associates, which we want to see through. And I truly believe that they should be thanked for this really important gift. So I think we've touched on that. I hear no mention of a railing on one or both sides of the steps. Timestamp is pretty in line with Brandon's. I guess Brandon's outline of that, saying that, you know, where railings where code appropriate would need to be put in. I can tell you that, you know, through this process, if people feel like they want more, we're certainly amenable to that. What we were hearing at the beginning part of the process, and anyone on the panel can correct me if I'm wrong, people wanted less invasive, less noticeable, really very low impact design. And so we only put in borders and railings where it was absolutely code necessary. Brandon, is there anything I'm missing? I'm sure that I am, so I'd love for you to pick that up.
That's completely, you're spot on, Kate. There will be, so in the meandering, more direct walkway with the stairs, if there's any more than 2 stairs contiguous, we do require, the code requires a railing. And then any point where the walk or the ramp system that is ADA accessible exceeds 5%, a railing would be required there as well.
Thank you so much. That's great. Will the Mass State be covering the cost of the stormwater repairs and renovations? Excellent question. Every time I've presented this project, I've been asked the same thing. The answer is a resounding no. They are happy to enter into a management and operational agreement with the town of Concord, so that we can be able to run it how we want, renovate it as we want, as long as it is an improvement to the property and doesn't take away any access. But certainly they are not able to give us any funding towards those efforts. A lot of things were done between the years of 2012 and 2014 to try to force that issue. And essentially, the Department of Conservation and Recreation said, you know, really, we're underfunded already as it is. And so we're focusing on these things. If you all think that this is, you know, something that the town of Concord believes is important, then certainly you can move through, and we would give you, you know, unfettered access to improve upon the area, but we certainly don't have any money to put towards that. So as frustrating as that is, that's sort of where we're at with that. This is a more technical question. I think it might be for Tim Sheehan, which says, how many feet of infiltrating soil would be between the bottom of the chambers and the top of the water table?
So not really for me.
Okay.
But
I can handle that one.
Thanks.
So mass stormwater management guidelines, and this is for everything in the state, particularly when it comes to stormwater management and these types of projects, I believe it's a minimal of 3 feet of coverage between the bottom of the infiltration chamber system and groundwater.
Great, okay. How many trees will be taken down to construct the ADA accessible path?
So I believe right now we're estimating approximately, I believe it's 12 to 15 trees. The intent is once we get out there, that we would be on site with the contractor and make adjustments in the field to try and save trees wherever possible. But we won't be able to save all of them, but we think we're about 12 to 15 trees right now.
Yeah, and the majority of the trees, we were very careful and walked the site and laid the pathway out the way that it is right now. Focus particularly on the hardwoods and protecting those. There are the majority of the trees that do have to get taken out are pine trees, mostly towards the bottom of the slope. And it's just because of the slope and the topography that's required to get that ADA ramp down to the beach area.
Understood, okay. The question, what is the purpose of the lower pavilion? Has the beach area been enlarged? So the lower pavilion is in fact not a pavilion necessarily. The beach area has absolutely not been enlarged. I'm wondering, Brandon, Jean, if you could bring up the artistic rendition of that particular area, so just so that we can talk about ADA accessibility, because that's really what that is about.
Sure.
Thanks. Great. Thank you.
Yep.
So basically what I can tell you here, and I can obviously let Weston and Sampson take over, they're much more skilled with that, but essentially what you're seeing here is an accessible pathway to and from the restroom area. And so while this is a wooden decking, what we want to do with that is sort of up for discussion. If the answer is we want to do nothing with it, that's wonderful. If the answer is we want to have some type of temporary shade structure over there, that's another thing. But I think that that's up for discussion. Am I missing anything, Jean and Brandon, on that one?
Nope.
Nope. Okay.
No,
Well, I think just the idea of if we did have a pavilion, it provides an opportunity to have protection from rain in case there is a shower that comes through, or people just simply don't want to be out on the beach and want to be in the shade. So that's the opportunity that we have by having that location there.
it could be quite pleasant too. You know, it's a slightly elevated prospect. It's a bit of a hub where people are kind of meeting as they would make their way down the hillside and also make their way to and fro from the restroom facility. So a little space that's not sandy, that's available for congregating and available for looking out over the beachfront and the pond from an area that's had structure on it historically.
Right, and so for just to allow people to kind of acclimate, this particular area where this is proposed is the area where the men's and ladies' concrete restroom buildings used to sit. Those have since been demolished, and we're working on getting those foundations up from there. But that essentially is a space that was programmed before. So I've gone through about a third of the questions, and I'm wondering if we could take some of the raised hands, except for that, I'm not sure that I can see that. Can anyone else see the raised hands?
I cannot.
I cannot either.
Ryan?
I can see the raised hands.
If you go to participants and you go all the way to the top of participants, I show.
Jeremy Romanol, oh, thank you, from the town manager's office. Perhaps he can manage the raised hands, and I appreciate
I would love to. I would love to. Okay, so I will promote Jeff Parker if you're ready. And
Yes, yes, sir. Yep.
Jeff, I'll make you a panelist.
Jeff still with us?
You did not join as a panelist. Jeff, I'm going to click allow you to talk. So if you have your question still, I'm going to click this and then you can go ahead and unmute yourself. Oh,
Here he comes.
Hello, hello.
Hi, Jeff.
Hi, Jeff.
How are you?
Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you.
Well, I want to thank you guys for, this, you've put a lot of work into this. I just feel, but I also feel that nobody knows about this. People that live around the pond, no one knows about it. Nobody knows about this. And to go straight to the town without everybody who's going to be impacted by this knowing about it is just not okay. I mentioned it to a few people yesterday and they were shocked. That pine forest, pine grove is a big deal to a lot of people. It makes the pond what it is. It's a gem we want to protect and preserve. So I think that people need to know about it before, and it has to see the light of day before you guys move any farther forward. Thank you.
Great. Jeff, I'm sorry, I was remiss. Could you please tell us your address since this is being recorded and we'll need to record your question?
Yeah, I'm at 315 Plainfield in Concord.
Thank you. And I don't know whether this eases your discomfort or whatnot, but this is our first step in the process. So the fact that no one knew about it is disheartening in a way, but I think that we're trying like heck to make sure that we're getting as many people to know about it and publicizing it as much as possible. And this is one of several public forums that we'll have. So we'll make sure to try to do our best to inform people and put it in places that people know about. But if you have other ways for us to get in touch with folks, we'd love for you to email us and let us know ways that we're missing getting the word out.
And Kate,
Okay.
just noting, I am heartened by the fact that at the peak, we had up to 72 participants. So I think that's a really great response. Sometimes pre-COVID, when we could meet in person, we'd be lucky to get half that many. So I'm
One
really
question.
grateful that people have chimed in.
Yes,
One
Mr.
que-
Parker, yes, of course.
Yeah, what is the minimal number of handicap spots you need?
4.
4. Well, we can certainly fit 4 at the bottom.
Well, we can't fit 4 at the bottom with the emergency services that we need to have there. And so that is the trade-off. And we're trying not to cut into the landscape there at the bottom or remove any other trees. And so that's the rub there.
Well, if it's a choice between affecting the hillside and putting spots at the bottom, that's an easy choice.
Okay, understood.
Yeah, the only thing is, I would say the terrain it's very difficult and it's really, really tight down in that vicinity. And we're trying to accomplish it within the area that's town domain and not part of the DCR easement. So we're actually only showing 3 spaces in total down in that area. A couple of them being available for emergency vehicles on a every moment sort of basis, and one of them being accessible. The other part, and it's really, really difficult to try to get an area that's actually level and compliant, even at that beachfront. And to try to get more would require additional pavement, additional penetration to area that's dedicated to soft surfaces at this present time in the beachfront area. And we're not available to impact the spaces that are dedicated within the DCR right-of-way. So it is really quite confining down in that particular vicinity.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yes, thank you.
Let's take hand raiser number 2, Jeremy.
all right. So I'm looking at Jeff Parker. I will click allow to talk and you can feel free to unmute yourself.
We just had Jeff.
Yeah,
Right.
We just had Jeff.
That is
Next.
not it. Mhm. And it's still up. Let's see. Okay, Kate Blair. I'm going to click
Okay.
allow to talk and you can go ahead.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. It's nice.
Hi, Ms. Blair. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. I'm Kate Blair. I live at 20 Darton Street. And
Thank you.
I'm the person from the Friends of White Pond that sends you water quality data sheets in the summer every week.
Much appreciated. Thank
Well,
you.
I think one of the question that I came up with listening to you guys, thank you, first of all, for doing all the work that you're doing. The question that I have for you is the terminology public park. I think when we think about what that might mean as far as how many people are going to be coming to the pond, not when you guys have your water, you have all your swimming lessons and all those kinds of things, but before that, after that, during the weekends, during the, after you guys have closed, before you open. I don't know if you know this, but the pond was overrun this year, starting about the middle of May until you opened. And you did a great job as far as, keeping the COVID safety protocols and all that. That was great. But before and after, all that sort of disappeared and the pond, I think, suffered. And as you know, we had some algae blooms and we'd like to keep those to a minimum. So my question to you guys is, if this is a quote unquote public park, how are you going to regulate the number of people who come? You mentioned rangers. Rangers were not used this year, as we all know. Are you going to reinstitute the rangers? How are you going to keep people who you say, well, they might come for picnics or whatever. How are you going to keep them from running down the slopes into the water and, give us all some more algae blooms next year?
Sure. Thank you. Great question. So the distinction as a public park or even as a public bathing beach does not give anybody carte blanche to just start moving in. And so we want to make sure that people know that each township, municipality, city, county is able to dictate the rules and regulations related to access and hours of operation and numbers of persons that are at their sites. One of the things that distinction as a park is related to access, and then the town's responsibility essentially to be able to protect that both as either a resource area, an open space area, or in some places areas that have protected species of both plant and animal. And that's really what the distinction is. As far as this year, we had every intention in the budget that we had proposed back in February. We had set aside money for the ranger program, and when the cities and towns were shutting down and closing and doing everything that we were instructed to do from the governor's office and the CDC, we disbanded the ranger program. And we've talked a great deal about the impact of that, both with natural resources and the town manager. And we tried to bring that back, and we're successful in bringing that back, at least in part, towards the end of August, when we were seeing an uptick in the use of Sachem's Cove. And so we have every intention, as we had for the past 4 years, of having the rangers both at White Pond and at the other natural resource areas and open space areas in town. We have no intention of not including that in the fiscal year 22 budget and beyond. Whether that's a guarantee, I can't say. Obviously, that goes through a pretty steep vetting process, both with, the finance department and the town manager internally, and then with the finance committee, the select board, and then ultimately the voters. But we certainly are prepared to do that. As far as having, the amount of persons that are using the pond, we have the number of parking spaces has generally dictated the amount of persons that we've allowed into the pond, but Ryan Kane has also, at least through this past year, been very vigilant in trying to decide how many people can come in and what the party size is and how long that they can stay. And while that wasn't a perfect system, that was our way of trying to limit the amount of persons that are in the place either at one time or just in total throughout the day.
Okay, that sounds great. It's I think my concern is you're not always there. And if there's a ranger who's sort of split between Sachem's Cove and the beach area, I mean, nothing's perfect, but I just wanted to make sure that there was some thought about how you were going to regulate the numbers of people that were going to come and use, because it sounds like a beautiful facility. It really does. I think you've done a lovely job. I just worry that it's going to be an attractive nuisance. And, you know, we also have neighborhood issues. Like, does this mean that, you know, we're going to have cars coming through the neighborhood, and all, you know, all of those questions are made more so when people hear public park, you know,
Sure, sure.
stuck down
Yeah.
in their neighborhood. You
Yeah.
know, I think
And
that's
similar
the
to
issue.
what we do with the other park areas, just so you know, we would submit a rules, regulations, and operational plan to the select board, which would also be heard at a public hearing. And that can go anywhere from hours of operation to seasonal operation to whether dogs are allowed or not allowed on leash, not on your leash, et cetera. And so as we move further along in the process, that's another operational concern that we'll have. And I'm hopeful that people like yourself will be able to come out and give their perspective.
Great, good. Thank you so much.
Sure, thank you. Jeremy, do you want to do raised hand, maybe number 3, and then I can do a couple more questions?
Sure. All right, Jim Ricker, I'm going to unmute you, or I'm going to allow you to talk. And if you want to unmute yourself and identify yourself, that would be great.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Good
I didn't know if I
evening.
pressed the right button.
Absolutely.
I'm technologically overwhelmed.
Doing
This is a really
fine.
good, it's a really good presentation. Thank you so much. I think you all put a lot of thought into it. I live at 68 Shore Drive, right on the pond. I've been there for 45 years and have swum in White Pond since 70 years. So got a lot of experience on what goes on around the pond, good, bad, and different stuff. I'm just going to make some comments, and you can respond if you'd like, but just things to be aware of. Number one, Dick Hale, I don't think we can thank him enough for what he's done. And I would propose something a little grander than just one place with a marker, but name the property, name the park after him.
Oh,
I think would be a great tribute.
okay.
Number two, about 3 or 4 years ago, Bob Hale, Dick's son,
Mhm.
took it upon himself to redo much of the drainage system at the bottom of the pond. And that probably wasn't a bit visible to a lot of people, but he had heavy equipment in there, Kate, and spent a couple of weeks working on it. So you all might, it's not just the original, clean outs that needed to be worked on. So it was substantial. We didn't talk about the fields, but I think at one point there was discussion about continuing to lease them to Steve Verrill for Verrill Farm for agriculture. And I think there's a lot of opposition to that because of the introduction of chemicals and pesticides and so forth. They are not organic farmers. And I think it's more than coincidental this year that without the farming there and just the grass, we had the least number of days shut down by the cyanobacteria. So I think there's a direct relationship there, and I hope that will be maintained as grass fields. The off-season management, Kate talked about that a little bit, but particularly for going to 3 seasons, we've all experienced over the years all kinds of abuse around the pond. And fortunately, our parking program in the late 70s eliminated a lot of it. But I think Recreation Department needs to have a plan on how they're going to manage this for the 3 seasons. And simple things like, I know there's a gate there now, but that gate is not closed, so people can park any time of day or night. So I think that would be a real benefit. Also, somehow integrating with the work for the park with what goes on in the cove. Even though that's under Delia's operation, I think integrating the resources there would have a big impact. There were several days of summer when there were more people swimming in the cove than were at the beach, well over 100 people. And that's an issue in itself, but it all ties to water quality. And then that's kind of the overlying theme here is what can we do about water quality? It's been it's been getting worse every year, not remarkably every year, but it continues to. And perhaps some of the resources that we might not put into this could be used for some of the things like working with the state to stop stocking rainbow trout in the pond who go ahead and eat the good algae, which eat the bad algae. So I think I guess what I'm advocating is a bit a holistic view that ties in with the improvements that you all have designed. So thanks for listening.
Thank you. That's
Thank
wonderful.
you very much. Very
Yep.
helpful.
Yep. And you know, there's so much that you said. I wrote down quite a bit of it, but as far as the fields and the leases to Vero Farm, most of what you mentioned is under our purview, and I think I've written it down, and we will certainly be looking at it. Particularly something that I just talked about is the rec department and my office basically having a management plan. But as far as the farms, that is a natural resource. That was the deed is for natural resources to be able to oversee that. And so I would say any concerns that you have with that, you probably want to funnel through Delia, but I certainly will mention it to her and make sure that she's aware of the concern. Let me just go to a couple of, I don't think we're going to get to all of the questions tonight, but it doesn't mean that we won't write them all down, because Erin Stevens, who is a saint on earth and also our public information officer, is diligently writing them all down. And so we will have written answers to them, ones that we did answer on camera and other ones that we don't get to, and we will send them out. But there is a question about how will the native low bush blueberry and lady slipper species be protected? And I'm wondering, while we have the professionals on the line, if someone might answer that.
Yeah, Brandon, you're muted. I think, you know, there's probably a little bit of work to be done in that regard. If we've got some significant understory vegetation, I think we want to do everything we can to protect that clearly. That's inherent to a native New England woodland landscape, if you will. Much of our work is occurring within areas that have been trampled due to, you know, sort of unrestricted flow of pedestrian movement, and also impacted by uncontrolled stormwater runoff. So a lot of our work, again, physical improvements to the site corresponds to the points where there's not a lot of understory. But where there is understory, and it's somewhat limited in this zone that we're working within, I think it's a great point, and we'll do our best to note where that's located and adjust the alignment of pathways and other improvements such that we're avoiding it.
So let me see. The budget for the line item for the upper picnic pavilion. So someone said I didn't catch a quick look at the budget. Certainly we'll put this out, but the budget actually has the path and picnic areas together. So if I'm able to, I just looked it up here. If I'm itemizing it, it looks like the stabilized stone desks at a 4-inch depth is somewhere between $2,000 and $2,400. And then, of course, it's however many picnic tables that we want to have at a cost of anywhere between $250 and $350. So that's relatively small potatoes in comparison. When you look at what we displayed on the screen, it was paths and picnic areas, which include sort of a stone dust path and some wood chipping around the edges, and that was, you know, upwards of about 180,000. But that, of course, includes the entire hillside. We have another one that says, I arrived late to this call, but is it only to address the improvement project and not the overall management? Yes, but if you have questions, concerns, suggestions about the overall park management and the parking area, I would really encourage you to write to both Ryan Kane and myself. His email address is rkane@concordma.gov, and mine is khodges, HODGES, @concordma.gov. Ryan Kane, this question is for you. Do you plan on increasing the fees in order for persons to access?
We haven't done the budget for the year, but one of the main goals all along has been to keep family access affordable as we look at the facility. So we haven't laid out the 2021 budget, and I feel like we finished last year in decent shape with the impacts from COVID not doing a major impact to us, but we will reevaluate that. But our intentions were to keep fees for family memberships, or household memberships is what we call them, to be affordable. When we were open and doing daily admission fees, we did have affordable family memberships and high daily visit fees, in the mindset of keeping the facility to be controlled and not be run away on a daily admission where one Saturday could just get overwhelmed with the place. So to ultimately answer the question, we haven't set next year's fees. We are in the process of evaluating that, but I think our mindset across the board in the recreation department is to try to keep those to be as affordable as we can.
Thanks, Ryan. This says, is the picnicking for White Pond members only, or is the facility open to anyone seeking to picnic? So as a park, it's open to anybody during the seasons that's swimming, and we're having people pay for parking passes. It would be open to folks who have parking passes. We haven't quite gone through the management plan, but our hope is to have things open and accessible for folks as often as we can. And Ryan just talked about making it affordable. There's more to come on that. Would the beach area be the same size as the current beach? Yes. Would there still be beach area under the trees? Yes, absolutely. Can you dig into the hill more, as the association indicated, to increase handicap parking? I think we discussed that earlier on. It isn't ideal. We'd like to not do that. And that being said, as Jean discussed, it still doesn't really assist us in what would be code compliant under today's standards. Was a lot of, okay, there's a talk about some blueberry bushes, which Jean talked about earlier. ADA parking near the beachfront. We already talked about that. So, and again, I will write these all down and make sure that we get them. Replacement does not make up for the benefit of mature trees. Absolutely agree with you, 150%. But it's what we need to do to make sure that we are compliant with both state, local, and federal guidelines. So we're doing our best. My question referred to the upper picnic area. Oh, I'm sorry, we already talked about that. Have you considered a hillside lift tram for disability access? No, we have not. And that's interesting. I feel like that might be met with folks who, feel like that might take away from the rural, character and kind of woodland vision, but certainly up for discussion. Will trees be removed to create the infiltration basin? I'm assuming, this is from Joseph Stein. I'm assuming, Mr. Stein, you're talking about the one at the top, and that actually, as Brandon had indicated, is already naturally there. But if I misunderstood that, if you could just type in at the bottom, and we'll make sure when we get back to that, that I'm answering that correctly. The plan is nicely done. It's not a good plan for the area. It's better suited to a town location, not the wooded area, a picnic grove, 2 pavilions, an overlook. So it says scale it back to about 60% is for what is shown. Certainly we'll write that down, make sure, again, as I said at the beginning, this is sort of, this was an illustrative idea of what could happen if people aren't wanting to see that. We certainly don't want to push anything down anybody's throat. Is there any way to memorialize people other than a parking lot pavilion? So it's not really a parking lot pavilion. It's really an overlook. And the idea was that kind of poised on the hill, there would be an area to be able to have some kind of quiet reflection, or even, a small gathering of some sort, where you'd be able to, oversee the beauty of the pond while being sort of taken away from the major programming area. Is there another way to do it? Of course, absolutely. But that's sort of what we discussed with the White Pond Associates when we were going through this. Shade and beach. So if someone wants to remind that the shade and beach area are really important. Absolutely. We understand that. Why are you trying to minimize railing? People in wheelchairs need them and other people would use them. Wondering if someone from Weston and Sampson might be able to take that one.
Sure. So it was a combination of trying to have a more naturalized, or a pathway that blends into the hillside more. We will definitely have railing. We aren't able to make all the walkways less than 5%. So where we are required to have railings, we will absolutely have railings. Code, if a walkway is under 5%, code does not require a handrail. So that's really the thinking behind that.
I think though, if it makes people feel more comfortable, we can do sort of a low profile rail, even where, we're less than the 5%, Brandon, and it's on the downslope side of the pathway. In other words, it may not necessarily have to be on both sides of the pathway where less than 5%, but to prevent people from sliding off of the pathway, I guess, on the downside, we could certainly entertain a low profile.
Sure.
So somebody asked, does Jeff have a last name? And I'm not sure which Jeff we're talking about. So, but I'm sure that he does.
Was it Jeff Parker, one of the commenters earlier?
Parker, perhaps. How many
don't know.
attendees on the call? I think at the height of the call, we had 73, although 9 of us are presenters. Will you keep the path used by people who walk in from Bolton Street, dog walkers, etc.? We have no plans to get rid of existing pathways. As a matter of fact, the more ways people can access it, the better. Will it be closed in the winter? Yes, yes, yes. That's why we're saying 3 seasons. Ryan Orr is responsible for the maintenance. Well, Ryan Orr and his crew, rather, are responsible for the maintenance and upkeep. And I do not believe that they have any intention of plowing or doing anything in the winter months. Ryan, am I correct?
Yeah, we certainly don't want to add any more additional salt or sand to the main entrance of the pond to do any more damage to the water itself.
There's a few folks on here that are saying that they're butters and they're not interested in living next to a public park. Totally understandable. Happy to talk to those folks offline about any individual concerns. Not promising that we're going to make you feel any better, but we're sure going to try. Surveillance cameras be an option early in the spring. Absolutely. We're seeing an uptick in vandalism, unfortunately, in a lot of public spaces, and we've been installing them around town. So I think, again, that's poor Ryan Orr, that's another thing we can add to his list, but it's certainly something that he and his crew can work with the police department for, particularly if people are seeing an uptick rather in vandalism. People are praising Jim. They think Jim is wonderful, so thank you. Jim Ricker, if someone was asking, they think Jim is great. In regards to farming, only 2 of 4 parcels are related. The other 2 are not deeded under NRC. Exactly correct. So there were 4 parcels initially, and the beach parcel actually is in right now is called B1, and it incorporates that and a small parcel of a triangular piece of land that, if you're coming down the boat launch area, is on the right side of the boat launch. It used to be called parcel X. That has an individual restriction that no permanent structures or buildings can be constructed on it. We have no plans for that, so we are fully in compliance, and couldn't imagine a reason why we would want to do that, as it's not operationally necessary, but you're absolutely right. There's some more questions about the blueberry bushes, which Jean had said they're going to be looking into. Okay, I have great concern about the plans for ADA access. I appreciate the access at the bottom of the road. Often there's elderly persons who come that would not be able to negotiate the hill. Reconsider this unaccessible plan. So I think we will certainly get back with Weston and Sampson about that. I think Brandon, Jean, and Tim have really done a great job dealing with the really difficult topography and trying to make it as necessary as possible. There's a couple of other comments here
Kate,
about.
can I just jump in on
Yes,
that one?
absolutely. Yep. I'm sorry.
I think one of the benefits of the design as it is right now of that yes, we don't have the handicapped parking spaces down at the bottom, but we're actually improving the drop-off area, and the routes from that drop-off are accessible. And so that anybody who feels like they're gonna have trouble and doesn't want to come all the way down the hill, there is always that option of being dropped off and being able to access the route, access the site that way.
Yeah.
Right. A lot of other comments about trees and, saying not to discount them. Again, someone's just reiterating what we said. So that's wonderful. How much of the budget has already been allocated with town budgets? We have $850,000 right now through a CPC allocation from fiscal year 19 and a $600,000 allocation from this current year's capital budget. We have requested $350,000 from CPC for next fiscal year 21, and we are also requesting another 500 to 600,000 once we get the final design put on. Jeremy, are you still on the call?
Yes, I am.
Are there other folks raising their hand? We're kind of running out of time. I'm wondering if there's anyone raising their hand that has something that either is new, we haven't answered, or can absolutely not wait until we put out a Q&A.
We currently have, shuffling around, we have 5 individuals with their hands raised at this moment.
So I would ask those 5 individuals, certainly we don't want anyone to feel like they didn't get their answers tonight. If there's something that's been answered, or you can write separately, or that can wait, if you can put your hand down, great. If not, we can probably muscle through those if we need to.
All right, so I'm looking at Carl. I'm going to click allow to talk. If you want to identify yourself, go ahead.
Hi guys, my name is Carl Cusin. I live at 51 Riverside Ave in Concord.
Hi Carl, how are you?
Good. I have a couple of observations, and then I'm going to give a clarification. And for the record, I want to identify that I was a 30+ year member of the White Pond Associate Board and the chief negotiator with the town for this gift. Couple of observations. I think regardless of when you visit White Pond, and I'm going to call it White Pond because I'm not sure how comfortable I am with park, and I guess I hadn't heard that before today. Regardless of when you come to White Pond, whether it's during the swimming season, which can be all 3 of those seasons, by the way, which I think is what you're hearing from some of the neighbors in terms of access. You want to be down by the water. So I question those pavilions that you're doing at the top as probably not a lot of use, because if you're going to come in the off season, it's cool, maybe you're not swimming, you still want to be down by the water. So it seems to me if you're going to make the effort to create some spaces, you do it a little bit lower. My experience at the pond would tell me that that pavilion at the top probably doesn't have real great views because there's a lot of vegetation on that hill. At least that's my recollection of standing up in the parking lot and looking towards the water. And finally, from a clarifying standpoint, Kate, We never spoke about anything specific in terms of the recognition of the board. I do actually, the one thing that I did mention during the conversation was the possibility that we would name the beach after Dick Hale for his 50+ years of stewardship at the pond. But there was never any conversation, nor was it presented to me that we would be building a pavilion at the top. So I just want to disconnect us from that part of the conversation. It's perhaps convenient for the planning, but I just want to make sure that people know that it wasn't our intention. And that's what I got. Thank you.
Yeah, so thanks, Carl. But again, I got my marching orders from the former town manager who had an outline, and I wasn't privy to all of those conversations. So whether you were in them or not, that's sort of what we have in the documents.
Kate, that's the point of my clarification. I just want to make sure for the record that that's clear, because there was no conversations about a particular pavilion at the top of the hill.
No, it wasn't a pavilion. Certainly that's true. And that's what I said, but there was some recognition as a thank you.
Absolutely. And I guess if I had my druthers, I would say the recognition should be down towards the beach. And the only reason we're having this conversation, Kate, and I'm sensing your defensiveness, is because there was no conversation with us in advance of this presentation.
Do we still have some hands up that we wanted to address, or did folks put their hands down? Jeremy?
We have 4 more. So I'm looking at Joseph Stein. I'm going to click allow to talk. If you want to identify yourself and unmute, go ahead.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, thank you so much. I'll be very brief. So just 2 quick comments. So I live at 21 Thoreau Street. You know, been a member for many years. The place is an absolute gem. You know, I noticed that there were, quote unquote, a couple of additional parking spaces in the proposal, but I'm counting at least 12, which is, if I do my math right, is a 20% increase in parking. So to me, that doesn't sound right. You know, if we don't need more parking, which is what I've been hearing, I don't understand why we need some more cutout parking. It's just more asphalt costs and invasive to the area. And I just will say that just adding more parking is basically guaranteed to invite more people to the beach, which will overwhelm the limited capacity that it has. And we've seen what happened with Walden Pond, which is basically overrun with so many people, Band-Aids on the beach, trash in the woods, etc. So the same will probably happen, and I fear that will happen. And then the last quick comment is, you know, we really don't need a playground. You know, I have 2 kids. It seems nice, but town has lots of playgrounds, and we don't need one here. It's just, you know, put the avoided costs in some sort of maintenance trust. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Stein, could you give us your name or your address just for the record? I don't think I got it.
I'll bring him back just 1 sec.
It's Thoreau Street.
Absolutely, Kate. It's 21 Thoreau Street. Thank you.
All right, I'm looking at Belinda Mancini. I hope I'm saying that right. I'm going to press allow to talk. And if you want to identify yourself, go ahead.
Oh. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. I started out by saying thank you for all of your good work and the generosity of your time. I'm sorry I'm going to something that we already covered, so please forgive me. Did I understand that what we need are 4 ADA parking spaces, and what we have down at the bottom right now are 3? I guess my question is, if we put 4 spaces down, handicap spaces down at the bottom, at the boat ramp, does that mean we would not need, at least legally, if not ethically, we would not need the handicap ramp going all the way down to the pond from the upper parking lot?
So I think I can probably answer part A of that and then give it to Weston and Sampson on that. But one of the things that we've tried to do with many of the park properties is to employ the universal design standard, which means that even if you're not somebody with a diagnosed mobility issue, that if you had a temporary mobility issue, if you were someone who was carrying an infant, if you were someone with a stroller, if you were someone with a temporary injury, or some other reason why a ramp way would be better than a series of steep stairs, and for the record, it's 50 plus stairs or so on the way down. And so that's what we've tried to do in most of the park spaces and most of the open public spaces. As far as the legalities of that, I'll leave that to Weston and Sampson certainly, but that was sort of the impetus behind trying to devise two ways to get down for any and all persons regardless of ability.
So you don't have to, nobody has to go further in answering my question, but I think what I'm struck by is please forgive me, but the somewhat intrusiveness of these developments from my sensibilities anyway. And I just wanted to make one other comment, which is I've gone down to the pond regularly for 20 years, and I went down there every day this past summer, and the town did a beautiful job of managing such a difficult summer. So I want to address that. But when I went down to go kayaking last Friday, there were 8 fishermen along the beachfront, and the ramp was also crowded with fishermen. And there were fly fishermen, and they're beautiful to watch, but you have to give them a wide berth. So I hope you understand where I'm coming from. And someone had a boom box, and I'm 70, and I'm not going to go up to a stranger and say, you're not allowed to have a boom box. So I'm just talking about protection of the quietude, and I'll stop there.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you,
Understood. Thank
Melinda.
you. Thank you for bringing that forward.
Next, we have William Walker. I'm going to press allow to talk. If you want to identify yourself and unmute yourself, go ahead. William, are you still with us?
Maybe skip to the next one.
Hello. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I have a hard time talking about the pond without getting emotional, so bear with me. I guess I would ask you to consider the historical significance of White Pond. If you read Walden, you'll get that message. And the quietude part and the clarity of the water and so forth. And I really support the idea, whatever you do, put Dick Hale's name on it. Really, he was a great guy, and I don't know that he would support something like this. I've been monitoring the pond, helping the town and the White Pond and the Friends of White Pond monitor the pond for like 20 or 30 years. And my sense is that it's definitely going downhill, and you can see that my website, www.walker.net/whitepond, has the data and some very graphic photos of what this pond has looked like in recent years when we have these severe algal blooms. And the difficulty is that there's so much year-to-year variability that people tend to forget. The people in the town management, they change, and we've worked a lot with the town, and they've done a lot, like on Sakeum's Cove and so forth. But when the pond gets better, just because of climate, variability, then that kind of disappears. So the emphasis on actually doing something kind of fades until the next algal bloom. And then we put the signs up and toxic algae and so forth. I worked with the friends in the town. We had the runoff controls at the boat ramp, and it looks like you're going to improve on them. But, there's a lot of changes you're proposing here, and I would sure like to take a look at that technically, but certainly aesthetically, it's not going to look anything like what Thoreau was looking at. Or what my kids and I looked at, when we spent time at the beach there. So, but there's a lot of variability in the pond. And I think I would like, what Kate said and what Jim Ricker said, yeah, that's pretty much the way I look at it. This is kind of a shock, and I'm sure the town's going to go through a very thorough review process. So I think it'll work out fine in the end. The fisherman part of it is really, I think that's really important. And I know there's been some efforts to contact the state fishery department. Yeah, there's the noise and, the beer cans and so forth, but they put these fish in the spring and the fall, and some of the fish are taken out and some are left in the pond, and they decompose and recycle, and that contributes to the algal blooms. And another part is there was sort of a mounting effort to treat the pond with alum to try to control the nutrient releases from the sediments a couple of years ago. And as far as I know, that's sort of died. It's not really expensive, 100, 200,000 at tops. And that would help to get reboot the pond and get it back on the right track. And, if you're going to try to do anything like this, maybe you could attach some kind of a remedy, a more serious effort to deal with remedies for the pond. So that's it.
Hey, Mr. Walker, thank you for your comments. The fact that you get emotional about it and you're passionate about it, I think is a great and wonderful thing. And I think that we take note of it, and we know we have a serious job working with the town to implement some improvements out here that make this place successful and manageable and sensible in regard to what gets constructed within, the stuff that's within our domain. We hope that it brings positive impacts from a water quality standpoint, because within our control is a much more robust stormwater management approach. So I think that's one thing that we can certainly commit. We understand the scale of improvements, and we want improvements to be well integrated in the site and in alliance with the natural overall character of the property. So thank you for that. I think it's helpful to hear that as we continue forward with advancing the design concepts.
Mr. Walker, could we also get your address? I didn't get it that time either.
I'll bring him back up.
Okay.
1 second.
I apologize.
Nope, he might have disappeared. Oh, there he is.
Yeah, 1127 Lowell Road. Lived here for 49 years.
Thank you.
All right, last but certainly not least, we have Beth. I'm going to press allow to talk, and you can unmute yourself and identify yourself, please.
Hi, this is Beth Kelly. I live on 39 White Avenue here in Concord, actually on the pond. And I'm just, hi Kate, I'm not sure if Carmen, I'm on the White Pond Advisory Committee, and Carmen had a list of our, we had a meeting last night, and we just wanted to kind of read off a couple of bullet points. And I'm sure Carmen's having technical difficulties. Can you guys see if she's on still? Because I'd let her speak. If not, I will go ahead.
We do have Carmen on. So I believe it is the chair of White Pond Advisory Committee, but I don't know if she's at her computer or anything like that. Carmen, you can.
Can you try unmuting her for a second? Otherwise, I'll go ahead. Thank you so much.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Carmen.
Hi. We did make some bullet points. You answered a lot of the questions. And Kate, I had sent you a late email just before the meeting. I'm sure you didn't have time to read it. No,
I
that's
didn't.
okay.
I was having some computer technical difficulties, but
It's an understatement.
So I just get the papers here. I agree with the people who say when you come to the beach, you come to the beach and you don't really come to sit by a parking lot. And that there were picnic tables always down at the bottom. They were often used by the lifeguards when they were in their off time. And also parents could use them to watch their children on the beach and sit in the shade, you know, and sit on something. So they were very useful at the bottom. I'm not so sure about the top. And I think Jim Ricker had a wonderful idea. I had down that, you know, I've gone to a lot of parks and you have trails and tree groves that are named in tribute of somebody, but to name the whole park or to name the beach, I think that that is so much more fitting for somebody who was head of the White Pond Associates, because they kept things very much of nature, not a structured thing. That seems to me to very much go with Dick Hale. And I also want to say, you talk about, yeah, the boat launch has been a terrible erosion problem. ESS report said that the worst areas of erosion were Sachem's End and the boat launch. They were the same color, the worst of the polluting. Now, Sachem End has had a marvelous reconstruction job or renovation job by Natural Resource. And the boat launch is left. And I'm glad you're going to work on that. But also be aware that when the town took over the property, oh, I'm sorry, I'm at 38 Shore Drive on the pond too, and I'm in a butter. When they started the tree work, then the erosion also moved across the beach. It gets quite gullied now. So you must be careful when you're taking out the trees and you're putting in the undergrowth, that hill is steep. And when they removed the trees, we started to get, you know, these really deep runnels on the beach, on the sand of the beach, which we did not get before the tree removal. So you need to be really careful about how you're removing and how you're replacing and your undergrowth. With our bullet points, I think really they've been covered. We just think, I've also for 5 years have made White Pond part of the EPA cyanobacteria monitoring group that comes out of the North Chelmsford lab. And we have had algae blooms. I think we've been better. This year we might have been very good because we've been in a terrible drought. And as I said, the runoff from the land was the most phosphorus causing problem. But also, we also have been trying to work with the state. The select board wrote a letter to state fisheries about not being stocked as much with the rainbow trout. They do eat the algae that would otherwise eat the cyanobacteria algae. So they're not a good fish to put in. They put them in because they grow fast and they grow big, and that's what the fishermen want. But the other trout actually are better for the pond than the rainbow trout. We're trying to get less stocking of the rainbow trout. They do it 3 times a year. We're trying to get it at least down to 2. And I think that's all I have to say. But, you know, the erosion on the beach, really watch it when you're taking out the trees and planting. You might not be able to tell, you know, that what the effect will be.
Carmen, did you share that bulleted list with Kate? Is that what you were referring to before the meeting?
No, it was another email, but I certainly will. But you've covered. I mean, you did cover it. It was a wonderful, complete presentation, which is what Kate Hodges always does, I must say.
Thank you, Carmen. You're very nice. I didn't even pay her.
Okay.
On that note, it looks like that's all of the names that we have for hands raised.
Okay, so there's some questions, some comments. Like I said to everybody, I'll work with the team to compile those with a Q&A. It might take a couple of days, and we'll go back through the recording here to make sure that we've captured everything accurately. But in the meantime, if there's any questions that you didn't get to answer or something that you think of later on, and we hope to, kind of take this information and bring it back and have a semi-final iteration, whatever that means, and have another, even if Weston and Sampson isn't with us, but at least at a staff level where we can get some more public input. So this is by no means the last of that, and we appreciate everybody's time. This was a really excellent turnout, and it just speaks to how much the community really cares about this property, and we want to make sure that we do right by you all. So we're working on it, and oh, I'm sorry, someone raised their hand. Jeremy, last person. Bring us home, Mr. Ricker.
Hi, Kate, sorry to interrupt.
No
but,
problem, no problem.
I'll forget this, but regarding the fish, I think it's being worked at too low a level. And several years ago, I think it was Corey Atkins, but I'm not sure. One of the state reps said they would be glad to take it on. It's really more of a political, thing, and it needs to go as far up the ladder as possible to get any change. So I just want to pass that on.
Okay, thank you. Well, we have several, or we had a couple of select board members, I should say, on the call. So we'll make sure that that's something that we relay to them and ask them what, if anything, that we could do together for that. So.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, everybody. I appreciate everybody's time. Thank you to the team from Weston and Sampson. You guys were wonderful, and we'll be seeing everybody again with something we hope is representative of at least what the majority is looking to see.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
Kate.
everyone. Take care.